morning, everyone, and I want to give you a very warm welcome at this livecast, here live from Almere in the Netherlands. And today you are participating in the Flevo Campus Dialogues, an annual event with the aim to create an international dialogue on food system innovation in the run-up to Floriade that is taking place here next year. And it's great to have you all as our participants today in an event that is themed Taste for Change. Today we will explore how we can create sustainable, healthy and accessible food systems for all, and what the role of taste is in changing food patterns. And we will discuss on how you can be involved in a practical way in urban food system innovation. We will all hear about this today. And it's great to have you as our participants. My name is Helen Kranstauber and I am the moderator of today's event. I am the founder of Food Cabinet, a campaigning agency, and I've been engaged in food projects for over the last 10 years now. And I'm very excited to be your moderator and guide you through a very tasteful program because, yes, we have a great lineup of speakers waiting for you today. They will share their insights and their knowledge with you. And so can you. We would really like you to be engaged as well and to create an interactive setup. So if you have any questions today, please share them on the online platform with our online moderator, and I will do my very best to get answers on each and every one of them, because we want you to be involved in the conversation. Then we are craving for our program, and what is a better way to start than with the program director of the Flevo Campus, because the Flevo Campus has initiated this annual event and is going to set the stage. Our first speaker is Lenno Munnikes, and he is a historian and anthropologist by education. I am told he's also a very good cook, and he is particularly interested in how to mix innovation with urban food systems and food traditions. And he is going to serve us some sort of an appetizer to shaken up our taste buds. So let's give it up for Lenno Munnikes.
Thank you very much, and also a warm welcome from me. First of all, I would like to thank everyone that online or offline is participating today. I am proud and very pleased to give a short welcome word for this Flevo Campus Dialogues. We have a program awaiting for us with very important topics, which will be led by absolutely excellent speakers and participants. But shortly said, what is the Flevo Campus? Flevo Campus stands for an inclusive and an accessible food climate. All our work, research, experiments and innovations are aimed at this. An example of a practical research project, our Supermarket of the Future project, will be presented later today by my colleagues. And today it's all about taste, taste for change. And taste, as the main topic of today, has incredibly beautiful properties that are worth exploring more. I will explain shortly why this topic is so important for the things we do at Flevo Campus. But in my opinion, this topic is also vital for all the food and nutrition disciplines. Because eating and drinking is a practical practice. With the act, people give form and meaning to their existence. They do this time and again, and each time slightly differently, depending on the historical, geographical, or social setting. And in interaction with experiences and images, these actions become part of our memories. This interaction makes life seem easier and gives people a meaning to their existence. But why then is taste such an interesting topic? The concept of taste has two definitions. On the one hand, you can speak, as social scientists like Bouazza did, about having a good taste or not. But on the other hand, taste is also a sensory perception. Both definitions can also be on the shifting historical plane. Both tastes are also subject to change are influenceable and are repositioned or invented or reinvented from time to time. This is an important fact to realize when delving into the dynamics surrounding food and nutrition. Cultural, historical, and social research can help us in thinking about the notion of taste and about how taste is passed on from one generation to the next. It was Bourdieu again that draws our attention to the intergenerational transmission of taste preferences, linked to status and social wealth, and how, often very subtly, it is precisely in everyday interaction that our habitus is formed. With the increased attention in recent decades to the sensory aspect of taste, new questions have arisen, and with them the need for new research methods, as we use at Flevo Campus. But we must also remain critical. Taste also has a negative connotation. The standardization of someone else's taste says something about yourself. The creation of a collective taste or the appropriation of a taste can exclude other people. If taste also determines identity, it can also create social or political tensions. A few examples of this. First, how cultural political divides are created or can be created between meat consumption and vegetarianism, as also a topic of today. Or another thing, the apparent differences between innovation and traditions, which can also be a beautiful link together. And also the invented link between heritage and social class, as I explained before. And of course the search for popular food and the really new search for authenticity. That is why it's so important, in my opinion, that is exactly what we're going to do today, is to have and keep the conversation and the discussion about this. Do that especially with someone who apparently has a different taste. After all, not everyone calls themselves a food changemaker. But first of all, have a lot of fun today. But secondly, and I'm sure that today's diverse program will contribute to the aim that more knowledge about taste, next to its sensory aspects, and in my opinion, even more important, in its social cultural definition. Because that will help us further in all our food and nutrition disciplines. And this knowledge will contribute to a more inclusive and accessible food system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lenno, for setting the stage for this Flevo Campus dialogue. And let us be hoping that it's going to be an open conversation and discussion on the importance of taste today. You mentioned the Flevo Campus, and we're of course really curious how this will look like in the very near future. It's being built here in Almere at this very moment. So let's have a look first.
Vanaf de zomer van 2020 gebeurt er veel op het Floriade-terrein. Er wordt onder andere gebouwd aan verschillende gebouwen die tezamen Flevo Campus zullen vormen. Een kennisinstituut dat zich richt op de toekomst van het stedelijk voedselsysteem in Nederland en daarbuiten. Het is de ideale plek om de grote uitdagingen die voor ons liggen in zowel de productie als in de consumptie van voedsel aan te pakken. Vanuit het nieuwe, groene gebouw van Eres Hogeschool zoeken studenten, onderwijzers en onderzoekers naar praktische oplossingen voor gezondheids- en duurzaamheidskwesties. In The Village kunnen de meest veelbelovende projecten van hen en andere voedselstartups een vliegende start maken door samen te werken met alle faciliteiten in de buurt. Zoals het Food Forum, dat erop gericht is de activiteiten van de overheid, voedselondernemers en burgers te stroomlijnen. Het bijzondere en duurzame ontwerp symboliseert de unieke en vruchtbare bodem van Flevoland. En het campusplein zelf? Dat wordt een speelse ontmoetingsplek voor studenten en bewoners, omgeven door een arboretum, vol bijzondere bomen. Met Flevo Campus wordt Almere een uniek knooppunt van wetenschap en praktijk, waarmee Voedselland Nederland zijn leidende positie ook in de 21ste eeuw kan behouden.
Yes, and we are back. We're going to start our discussion and we're going to talk about why do we eat what we eat and how can we use taste to transform our food systems and change food patterns. This is what we will discuss in the next part of the program with two fantastic speakers. But we're going to start with Professor Stefan Wahlen. He's a food sociologist at the Giessen University in Germany. And in his research work, he focuses on food preference of consumers and eating behavior and changing food cultures. And he will serve us his keynote.
Hello and welcome here to Almere or at home. I'm very glad that I'm here and I'm able to talk to you about some of my research and sharing some insights on the more social aspects of food. My presentation today is about taste in socially sustainable food cultures, and I would like to take you on a journey to think about food eventually a little bit differently than you might be used to it. I would like to emphasize the social aspects of food in my presentation, and I think that I might eventually not have very clear-cut answers, but I would like to help you in posing some questions. If you think of taste, the social aspects of taste, and how to change towards a food system that is more sustainable in various ways. And what I would like to talk about today, there are three main issues, building on what Lenno just introduced on in his short introduction. I would like to talk a little bit about taste as being social, trying to distinguish the different dimensions that are involved in the social aspect of food. And after that, I would like to talk about food systems. I would like to talk about food justice in food systems thinking, which I think is very important if you think of the more social aspects of food. And towards the end, I would like to talk about tasty food in local food initiatives, as different actors around the globe are currently engaging on the very practical level towards changing the food system towards a more sustainable direction. What I'm going to do today is to focus a little bit on the tomato, because I think it's a very, very interesting example. Thinking about the tomato is, I mean, I'm now working at the university in Germany, and when I stayed here in the Netherlands some time ago, a former colleague told me why tomatoes in Germany are not as tasty as they are in the Netherlands, because the tasty tomatoes, they stay here in the country, and the less tasty ones they are exported. So you can already see that there's much more to taste than the sensory perception of which you might think at the very first hand. So my first point that I would like to talk about is the fact that taste is more social. Saying that there are different dimensions of taste. What Lenno already said, there are quite a lot of researchers focusing on taste being social in a way that also there's a social structure in the taste, referring that taste has a socio-economic dimension that I'm going to talk about, but taste is also historic. Taste might be changing along the line. Taste is also aesthetic, as you might see on this very nice picture, that it's also when you like something that is food and it's arranged in a nice way, it's a very interesting way of also conveying what is a good taste, for example. And to start with, I would like to focus on taste being physical, so the more bodily experiences that we make. Because in the end, it's also not only from the body that we eat, that's a very natural perspective. The sensory perceptions, we know that we're tasting on our tongues the different tastes, if it might be bitter, if it might be sweet. But I think it's more than only the taste which belongs to the body. It's also your mind. We know that food for thought is such a saying, or saying that this is not my cup of tea. There are all these kind of sayings that are emphasizing that even though there is a bodily experience involved in food, there's much more to it when we think of societal aspects. when I again refer to the more aesthetics, think of, for example, the foodies that we can witness across the globe, that we see on Instagram or on other social media. People are posting, taking pictures of their meals in order to convey messages and tell other people what they are eating. So you can see that there's much more to eating than just being hungry and going against your hunger, but there's also something that you communicate with eating and that you communicate it to other people. When you think of history that I mentioned, tastes are also historically specific, because from a cultural perspective, taste might be changing along the line. For example, we have witnessed the corona pandemic in the past 1.5 years, and we see that people stay at home, they start baking bread. It was a really big thing in many European countries where people rediscovered that baking bread can be fun, it can be more tasty. And these kind of memories that we are living through in our personal life, they also extend on taste on a social level when we, for example, experience moments of crisis, but also more personal experiences, thinking, for example, of special events in your life, thinking of of a marriage or the last birthday party. You have specific food that you're arranging for these events, and it's nice to see that there's a social aspect. But, and this is also, if you think of taste being social, taste being socio-economically structured, that the specific taste for more sustainable food is an issue which is relating to specific social groups, saying that talking of food and talking about sustainable food, it's a question of, for example, more in the European context, the upper middle class. So that most of the sustainable food that is eaten by a very specific range of people. Also, with regard to health, we know that, for example, after the first child is born, people tend to move towards more sustainable food in order to allow the child to grow up in a healthy and sustainable way. So, to sum up this perspective on taste as social, I would like to pose the question how there are various actors. If you think that taste is physical, it's aesthetic, it's socio-economic, and it's also historic, how are these various social actors involved in the food system contributing to what is understood as a good taste? Coming to my example of the tomato, it is a very interesting thing that you can distinguish between the different kinds, the different varieties of tomatoes that you will, for example, be able to buy in the supermarket, be it the more sustainable one, which is associated with a more flavory aspect from a sensory perspective. But let's move on to the second aspect of my talk, which is that I would like to talk about socially just food systems. It's continuing the story about the social aspects of food, knowing if there are various actors involved in these food systems, the question is how can we shape food systems as a whole and all the actors, treat all the actors that are involved in the food system in a socially just way and allow for accessible, sustainable and healthy food for all. So you already see that sustainability and sustainable food is not only about the environment, it's one key cornerstone. However, I think it's also very important to focus on the more social aspects of food. If you consider food systems as central, it is much more than the food chain, those that are producing and distributing food. I would rather start with the food cultures, saying that people that are eating, if we are considering or flipping the food chain, not starting, as for example the European Union does it, saying we have developed a farm-to-fork strategy, starting from the farm towards the fork, so the meal table. I think it's much more important to start thinking with those that are eating and really trying to reflect what is the cultural aspect of food and why is taste so important, or why is some food associated with being good, whereas others are treated as not good. As with the example I have been talking about in the tomato that is sent abroad and the tasty food stays here within the Netherlands. So if you start from thinking what are food cultures, And what I said already, that there's a socio-economic patterning of sustainable food, and that the sustainable food overall is an upper middle class thing. The question is, how can we make the sustainable food more accessible for all? And how can we demonstrate that food, sustainable food, is not only a means for those with higher income or higher education, but how can we create a food system that is more just and allows for the various actors involved in the food system to lead a healthy and sustainable lifestyle. So the socio-economic patterning is one aspect, thinking of food and who is eating, but you can of course extend that along the food chain. For example, asking what is the role of the different people involved in the food system. That might be workers in supermarkets or on markets, but that might also be some people working in the production, in the agricultural production of food. And again, if I come back to my example of the tomato, we can ask ourselves, what about the tomato? Where is the tomato grown? Who has been involved in the growing of the tomato, and who has been involved in the picking of the tomato? And how can we create, again, a just food system that involves also fair labor conditions for them involved in the food production? So again, here we can ask ourselves the question, when we talk about socially just food systems, how can we create a system that works in a sustainable and healthy way? And what is the aim that this food system is working upon? Is it making the most profit for the companies or for the farmers? Or is the aim creating healthy and sustainable food for all? And I think there's quite a difference when we are living in late capitalist societies, as we are doing nowadays, that a lot of activities in the food system is geared towards profit making, whereas it might also be well to think about how these food systems are shaped and what we aim for. And I think it's a stark contrast when we think of producing food for profit or producing food for providing food for all in our society. So this is a question that we can, of course, discuss in a second. And to come to my last point of the presentation, which is about the tasty food in local food initiatives. And here on the picture that I brought to you, we had been on an excursion a couple of years ago with colleagues. And this is a rooftop garden where people grow in a local food initiative their own food. And I think this is what you can see and witness around the globe in many cities in Europe, but also beyond, that people are recognizing that the current food system as it is built is not just and is not producing tasty food, because the industrialized and standardized foods that we can eat from the market might be less tasty, but still taste is also in a way social, what I said towards the beginning, and that when we see the connection, the reconnection of the consumer with the production system, that it might be a much more tasty food when we know that we grow it ourselves. For example, I have been growing my own tomatoes this year, and it made me extremely proud knowing that from a very tiny seed I was able to grow a plant and eat the tomato in my own backyard, being connected to my own food, but also, as in the case of a lot of food initiatives, not only growing the food but also sharing these experiences with friends and co-participants in these initiatives. So when I talk about local food initiatives, think of, for example, the community-supported agriculture schemes that are growing across the globe, where people standing up also for creating a more just system, guaranteeing the farmer a secure income and paying a fixed amount of money to get food during the growing season, but also sharing the risk of not having food growing during that season because, for example, it was too rainy as this year. You can also see mushrooming a lot of food policy councils in Europe and in other countries, where people at the local level come together, various stakeholders on the production, on the governance side, but also on the consumption side, in order to elaborate and think together, how can we change the current food system on the local level towards a more sustainable one. That might also be problematic, I'm well aware of that food on the local level, it might be deemed with a higher quality, but it's also something worth to mention that in many cases we are not able to produce enough food at a local level in order to still our taste, in order to have enough food. So you can also be a little bit critical towards these initiatives. However, I think it's a very important momentum that there are a lot of niches in the food system where people are experimenting. And I think it's very interesting from a social science perspective, investigating these different niches and see how change is coming about from a more bottom-up perspective, where people coming together and think, hey, there's something wrong within the food system, and we would like to promote more healthy, more accessible, and more sustainable food on the larger scale. Okay, to conclude, I would like to just round up and say that there were three main things that I talked about today, reminding you that food is social. It's much more than only the bodily experiences and the nutrients intake. That there are socio-economic, there are political, but there are also aesthetic features of food that we need to consider when thinking about taste in sustainable food cultures. Then it is also imperative to think about social and environmental justice, thinking of who is eating, thinking from a social stratification, of a socio-economic status of those that are eating, but also of those that are producing the food, taking along all the people that are involved in the food chain. And one option, for sure not the only one, but seeing on a very local level on how can we try to make a change, how can we change for taste, and how can we taste the change already in the now and trying to change the food system also in the future. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'm very much looking forward to your question via the chat or how the system works. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Stefan, for your great introduction on this theme. We will talk more about this in a minute or so. Like Stefan said, if you have any questions already, please let us know so we can talk about them later in this program. Because first we will move on to the second guest of this program, and she is Chef Selassie Atadika from Ghana. I think she's already online. Hey, Selassie, good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much. And it's great having you here in our live show this morning. Let us first start with a good introduction on your work, because you have been working at the United Nations for quite some while. And then you started your own restaurant in Accra in Ghana. And that restaurant also functions as a research institute, and you're working with local food producers and actually promoting the local Ghanaian cuisine in Ghana. So can you please tell us a bit more on your work before we discuss with Stefan about the role of taste?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I moved back to Ghana after working with the United Nations. I felt that food was something that kept bringing people together. And there's something about food in terms of just being a convener, but also the links of all the people, from the people that are growing the food to transporting, to processing, to preparing the food, and then to those who are eating, that really creates this link. I also saw opportunities for more economic change as well that could happen through food. And so when I started the restaurant, it's been an amazing opportunity to really understand the challenges that we have in the food system. I think starting out, it was a bit naive. And after so many years now working in the system, I can really understand and seize the bottlenecks and the challenges, the issues around supply and demand, the issues on the politics and the policies, that are affecting how we eat. And so it's actually really supported me to want to do more in terms of the social change that's needed for us to actually have this food systems change happen.
Yes, and do you recognize what Stefan is talking about, actually having taste being, a social structure, but also having this, political structure in it? I mean, how is the situation in Ghana? Is it comparable with some of the things that Stefan is mentioning?
Yeah, I definitely, I would say that there are a lot of elements that ring true to what's happening in what I see in Ghana and other parts of the African continent. I mean, the example he gave of the tomato is interesting. The tomato, something as simple as a tomato in Ghana, when you look at it, there's actually been a documentary done looking at how tomatoes are grown in the northern part of Ghana, that the sunlight hours and everything works really well there. So let's say Navrongo in Ghana is where tomatoes grow really well. You will find there's actually an exodus of people who are not able to sell the tomatoes. So there's, in the documentary, it talks about this tomato farmer, and she's farming the tomatoes by herself. Her husband left Ghana to find job in Europe because he wasn't, able to make an income and sending money back home to the family from Europe. And it turns out he's working in a tomato farm in Italy, where they're canning the tomatoes and sending it back to Ghana and selling it at such a cheap level that it's actually pushing out those who are growing the tomatoes in Ghana. So you start to see the policies and the politics of how just something as simple as a tomato has such a huge impact on the economy and families and lives. I would even say, to go a little bit further, in Ghana, you'll start to see, and in other parts of the continent, you'll start to see things that are not just not tasting good, but not approved. So for example, there's meat that's been in freezers, commercial freezers in the European Union that may no longer be for European Union standards, and they end up in places like the continent. So we're getting things that are getting dumped into our markets that are not fit for the European consumers. We've got things like a lot of the soft drinks and sodas that are kind of out of fashion, if you will, in a lot of the Western countries, and these companies have the money and are looking for new markets, and they're dumping here. They are finding, people who are looking for aspirations, they're looking for middle-class customers that want to spend money, and this is where a lot of these products are ending up. So it's interesting when you see who has the money for advertising and to push some of these products to where we are. It can be kind of dangerous to our economies and our health systems that are here that are not strong enough to support sort of the diabetes and sort of the middle class diets that are starting to come up when some of these products are sort of being thrown and dumped in. So yeah.
And how do you go about, because you're promoting the local cuisine of Ghana, and I know some of your work, it's also about ingredients and products that are actually being pushed away by current agricultural systems or by food cultures that are disappearing. How do you go about? Is it the same like Stefan mentioned, like first, the higher and upper middle class people getting enthusiastic about, this new idea, or how to promote this local cuisine in Ghana in your work?
I think it has to come from many different levels all at the same time. The work that I've been doing, I started working with the restaurant, and some of the challenges that I met were that some of these ingredients are actually more expensive. So local chicken in Ghana is twice the price of imported chicken. The imported chicken is coming from different parts of the world where there are subsidies and or dumping and or facilitation of how they get into the country. And so the local farmers are having a tough time. The local chicken, if you ask them, they'll tell you that 80% of the price of that chicken, and the reason why it's so expensive is because of the feed. So they're actually bringing in soy and some of the other inputs that is actually being used to raise the chicken, and that's quite expensive. So what I realized is that for me to do a lot of these local ingredients and supporting local agriculture, we don't have an economy of scale in Ghana on some products, and therefore those ingredients need to be more expensive. In other areas, we actually don't have a supply chain for those products because they were not deemed for export. And so there was no infrastructure, roads or transportation available to bring them to the market. So for me to do that costs more. So my model is for the upper middle class because of the financial implications of buying these ingredients. So what I'm saying is that, yes, we need the middle class to support this, but the middle class alone cannot change it. We need to think about a supply and demand structure which allows for example, major consumers, let's say government procurement, let's say, I'll give my favorite example, which is around millet. If we take millet, millet is a grain that grows in many parts of the continent. In Ghana, it's drought resistant. It does not need a lot of inputs. So in terms of nitrogen, et cetera, it's really something that is great for the soil as well. So, but it's considered poor people's food. It's considered what we ate when we didn't have money. So there's a psychological need to get people ready for it, to be excited about it. There's not a lot of recipes in Accra available for that ingredient. So we need to build a body of bloggers, restaurants, chefs that are using that ingredient with new ways. But fundamentally, for that to become interesting for enough people, the price has to come down. Because fundamentally, for a majority of the people to take that on, there needs to be an understanding of the budgetary implications of that and the social justice around that. So how do you make that happen? What if, let's say, government hospitals, government school feeding programs, military, police, anything that has large amounts of people that are consuming, if they were actually committed to purchasing that, then all of a sudden the farmers now would be able to grow it, because now they're looking at growing subsidized corn or soy, which is now being subsidized to promote and push those products for poultry and for other uses. That farmland could now be incentivized to be used for millet if they knew they were off-takers. And they would also buy better processing equipment. Right now, the millet is getting thrashed on the ground, and so it's picking up stones. So what if we, that incentive of knowing that someone's gonna buy this by the end of the season is gonna allow them to make that investment to get that equipment. So I think if you get a large off-taker or off-takers, all of a sudden the supply is gonna improve in quality, and then you can start looking at the middle level consumers, and all of that is going to drive the price down and allow it to be something that more and more people can consume. Yeah. So I think it has to be a multi-pronged strategy.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like doing a lot of things at the same time, like scaling up the production, but also, like you said, like working on the image of millet, maybe at a younger generation, or if people see it as poor man's food, like how do you get it more popular or more accepted by a large group of people? Do you have an example also using taste and the experience of like the eating culture to get people enthusiastic again about this particular product?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll take fonio, for example. Fonio is a grain that has actually, over the last few years, gained popularity both outside and inside the continent. And sometimes it actually is happening at the same time. But I would say, for example, if I take fonio, I was able to get it in New York on Amazon before I was able to easily find it in Accra. So one of the challenges is the advertising and the support for the social, I would call it behavior change. But now in Accra, there are more restaurants carrying it, which means more and more people are ready to eat it at home because they've seen it being used in a different way, or in a new way, or an exciting way, or in a fancy way. And so I think the important thing is everybody in life wants to be aspirational. So unless we can have and engage in conversation on how to keep some of the traditional ingredients and foods and present them in a way that allows for aspiration, we won't go forward. I think that's one of the important things that we need to look at.
Yeah. Stefan, I see you making notes. Yep. That's always a good sign. Listening to Selassie, I mean, do you see comparisons, like also in the research you are doing? There are so many aspects when you're talking about the millet. I mean, scaling up the production takes government, intake, but also restructuring the whole food chain, getting consumers excited. I mean, it's a lot of things, and a lot of actors have to, play together. I mean, how to go about? Is there one actor you'd say, if he makes the first move, he or she makes the first move, we're gonna go forward in this? Or
I particularly like the example that you mentioned on the public catering. I mean, that's a really, if you see, probably it's the same here in many European countries, that we have a lot of public canteens. It might be in prisons, it might be in schools, it might be at universities. So there's a lot of food produced, and I think that's a very, very good start. However, I would not start from a behavior change perspective, but I would rather emphasize the taste, having tasty food, because you can see that in the past there was not an emphasis on taste. If you know that the food that is produced in public catering is often produced in big masses, and there's more an emphasis on the money that is involved, saying we have to produce as much food for little cost. And I think that's a problem. Then we really have to consider how to produce good food. Yep. What is a good food might be changing, of course. And I'm not saying that I know what is the good food, because probably the food that I like might be not the food that other people like. But it's worth starting a discussion about the quality of food and how can we really reach a step where there's an appreciation of food. It's not necessarily only the valuation in economic terms, but also the valuation in terms of cultural appreciation, knowing that there is a rich culture in each and every region of the world. People have been eating for forever because we need to eat, and appreciate these cultures and learning of understanding the history, understanding the context, and that's why I liked the example of the millet, which is a food which is probably associated with more negative connotations nowadays, and we have the same food around here in Europe. However, I think it's very important to learn that these foods have roots, they have histories, and to appreciate that and value the history that we have in our foods is something that we really should push forward, because
No, I absolutely agree, and I think, I mean, from my perspective, I did flavor is definitely I guess would be my first port of call. I mean, starting out as a chef in Ghana, my premise was, if I make it delicious, people will consume it. And I think that is the power that chefs have. But I also know that with every culture and every space, there are different drivers. So I would say, for example, if we take plant forward, in some countries, the driver of planetary health, sustainability, is something that is enough for people to want to change. In Ghana, it is not a driver that is going to create change. For us, it's going to be health. And understanding the impact on your health status is actually what socially makes somebody want to change. For us, volume is generally something that we favor over quality. And so it's really the nuances of what, they always say, like, price, convenience. Convenience is another one that's a huge one. Millet takes a lot longer, and so right now everyone's eating more rice because of that. So there are different drivers in how families and people are selecting and choosing.
Yeah.
And I think that these drivers they are culturally specific, and I think it would be wrong to say that we have one size fits all solution, and that's why we really need to look into local problems and the local ways of solving these problems, and also in the way of appreciating the different perspectives that are coming into play. Yes,
there's not one formula. That's unfortunately. You mentioned chefs, Selassie. I know you are also part of International Chefs Network. It's called the Chefs Manifesto, a group of chefs that is all over the world actually prioritizing food to be part of the discussion on sustainability and climate change. Can you tell us a bit about this network and what it's aiming for?
Yeah, the network is initially was set up to get 2020 chefs on board by 2020 to support some of the development goals that we have around food. And so there are several principles, including plant forward, local, biodiversity, and a lot of chefs do subscribe to that, and trying to make sure that in everything that they're doing, that they encourage and promote those principles.
Yeah. Do you think that is a universal thing? I mean, I know in the Netherlands, chefs can be really famous, and they're seen as sort of rock stars. There are cookbooks every day, new cookbooks. Is that the same in Ghana? Are you a rock star?
No, I'm definitely not a rock star. I think that, I mean, it is changing. There are definitely, I would say, people coming up as sort of, celebrity chefs and things like that in Ghana and other parts of West Africa, et cetera. But I would say that it's important for us. We have a huge role to play. I think in the context that we're in, there needs to be a lot more education and support. I remember when I first moved back to Ghana, I was doing a talk somewhere, and someone was like, they introduced me as Chef Selassie, and this is about 7 years ago. And someone said, "What's the difference between a chef and a cook anyway?" And before I could respond, somebody else heckled and said, "A chef is someone that cooks for people who are not hungry." Because in Ghana, very much the way it's seen is that there's caterers, there's chefs, there's caterers and there's cooks. That's what we have in our vocabulary. And so chef is something that's quite new. I think it's important for us to continue to educate those people who are feeding people. In Ghana, I would say that the people who are feeding most people are the local caterers that are doing almost like street stall stands, because during lunchtime, no one has the time to go home. And so they're just grabbing something quickly. And so the more we can influence all different types of cooks, I think the better it is for us to start to see some of these solutions coming up around the continent.
Yeah. And do you see, like, in maybe a younger generation, more interest in the profession of chef? Is it sort of evolving? Because, also in the Netherlands, it's different from 10 years ago. It was totally different. Do you see it's evolving? Young people are maybe more interested in the topic?
Yeah, there are people that are interested. They're definitely, if I look at it now, there's a lot more Ghanaian chefs that are independent and doing their own projects. Prior to that, a lot of the food culture was more in hotels. And now you can start to seeing a lot of Ghanaian chefs opening their own spaces and being able to articulate their food in different ways.
Yeah. We talked about the Chefs Manifesto, the network. We actually have a really nice video, and it's really nice. So we just wanted to show it so that people have an idea where it's all about. So let's have a look at the video of the Chefs Manifesto, and then we talk about your work further.
White collar never fit clean on me. Only thing nice is the jeans on me. Playing dirty, trying to switch on me. Only thing pretty is the...
Wherefore art thou from?
Where's it going?
rugged wrist.
What is it?
Is it in season?
How far has this traveled?
Is that happy?
You sure you need it?
As chefs, we ask questions about food.
I've been out here wildin'. Angel on my shoulder saying bout it.
Why so much plastic?
We sit between the food you eat
And how it gets to you.
I swear to God, if my
So we're getting together,
From all countries.
all parts of the industry.
All walks of life.
To bring positive change to the kitchen.
We're talking soil,
Carbon.
Waste.
Diversity,
Biodiversity.
Water.
accessibility,
and what have we got to say for ourselves?
Plenty.
This is the Chefs Manifesto.
I've been out here wildin'.
I want to be part of this as well. I'm not a chef, so it's not gonna make it. But it looks really good, like a great network of passionate people. Stefan, moving to you for a question. We were just discussing. There's not one formula. I mean, every food system, it's different depending on the local, regional context. But what is the role of governments in also, pushing the or making the social side of food more important? Because I think as people we're also really influenced, like what our governments give as an example.
Yeah, I think that governments are setting the regulatory boundaries of how food is produced and how food is consumed, and I think in that way it is very important to also interpret the regulations that we have, because of course it's nothing that is set in stone, and that if you look from a historical perspective, again, regulation has changed, and in many ways for example, in the European Union, you see that food waste is an issue relating to the Sustainable Development Goals, which is partly also due to the fact that we have regulation to safeguard the consumer by, for example, the best before or the best before date. Well, the intention was to safeguard the consumer, but on the other hand, we're producing much more food waste because food is thrown away because it is beyond the expiry date. So I think that there's also things that are evolving and that are changing, and that these regulatory frameworks need to change as well with the societal changes. And what I tried to talk about in my talk was that at the local level, there are a lot of initiatives coming up, and I think it's very important that government is supporting the civic engagement. That if people are wanting to make a change, that they are supported in what they are doing. Well, for example, we did some research on food sharing, which is a food rescue organization which picks up food that is beyond the expiry date and puts it in public fridges and public places where people can still eat the food. And in Germany, there was a big debate of whether this is possible, because according to the regulation, this organization that is picking up the food is providing for the food and then also responsible for it. So there's a question of liabilities. And in some cities, there was a debate between the city officials, the municipality officials, and this initiative, and they tried to solve the problem by cleaning regularly, for example, a very banal thing. But I think it was the different actors that play together, and if you really would like to make a change, it's not necessarily only on going about more, for example, organic food, but it's more taking all the actors that are involved and government officials as well, taking these actors with you along these change processes and try to find consensus on finding local solutions for the problems that we have.
Yeah. And also, like, really giving the right example. I know, for example, in France, they have the school lunches, warm lunches for school kids. It's also about setting the example of, that food is important. It's an important part of your day, learning about taste. So sort of besides all the regulation and the theoretical part, it's also, I think, about, showing what is the importance of food in our daily society, daily practices.
I think that France has been a very nice example of forbidding to waste food. So if you, from a governmental perspective, it's possible to say, hey, this is something which is not socially, culturally, politically desirable. So as a government, they decided to say it is not allowed to throw away food. You have to find solutions so that the food is still eaten by those that are hungry. And this is, I think, a very a way to move forward, to say that we take the taste perspective and that we take the different actors that are involved in these processes in order to advance change.
Yeah. If you have any questions at home, please let them come in, because we can have some questions for our two guests. I already have a question for you, Selassie, and it's about how you are making, or how are you trying to make good food accessible for all? I mean, you just told us, you're really focusing more on the middle class with your restaurant, but how, can you, your vision, how can you create more accessibility for a larger crowd?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I did start the Institute, because I felt that there was a need for us to have the conversation with a wider audience. It's important to realize, what your limitations are. In terms of what I can do a lot of work around advocacy and policy. I can also support messaging for the larger community. So with the Institute, we're doing research and trying to understand what's happening and sharing that information as widely as we can, as well as working with other collaborators. So there's a friend of the Institute who's an artist who does a lot of very interesting satirical cartoons, which with him, he always works on things that are political, and food is just so political that we can have a conversation where he's drawing things that are touching on sort of what's happening in society for us to start questioning and looking at how we eat. Yep. And so I think that's the way forward in terms of impacting the change that needs to happen in the larger society. I think it's also important for us to raise awareness that there's a tension between sustainability and yield, let's say. So there's a lot of work being done around being able to have enough food to feed people. But there's not really enough support in looking at some of the issues around biodiversity and sustainability. We recently started doing a project on rice, and we realized that a lot of the rice that's being promoted, if you know about rice, there's kind of two types of rice in the world. There's the Asian variety and there's the African rice. And a lot of the research that's happening is actually only happening to the Asian rice because Asian rice has a higher yield. But what we're not talking about is that the African rice has a higher nutritional value, but also requires less inputs. Doesn't need as much fertilizer. It looks, when you look at the soil and the health of the soil, it's a better choice for us to make. But there's no research money going in there. So we're working on trying to support and promote some of those areas that are less sort of sexy and exciting in the big picture of how people are looking at food and systems.
Yeah, it's also really choosing your battles and focusing on advocacy and, like you say, like pinpointing and what are sort of the knowledge gaps when it comes to sustainable food production. I have another question coming in. I think it's for Stefan. Do you think there's any meal or product that is perceived similar across social classes or cultures? I mean, are there, connectors also? I mean, it's not as divided,
food is connecting, of course. There might be national tastes, which is interesting that there are specific foods. We talked about France. You have the red wine, which is a typical French food. There are, of course, different kinds of foods which are connecting. And that's why I'm saying it is very important to start thinking from a food cultural perspective. Also linking to what Selassie just said, we are currently working on diversity, which is a very interesting aspect, which is considered from a biodiversity perspective, but not necessarily from a dietary diversity perspective. Because we can see there are foods which are locally specific and connecting people from various regions. The region might be bigger or smaller, but in a way there are dishes that are, of course, connecting people rather than differentiating.
Yes. Yeah.
But the question is where you draw the boundaries. If you have the specific Dutch food, if you have specific French food, German food, or Ghanaian food, there are different kinds of way of integrating and differentiating. And of course, there are food stuff. I know in the region where I grew up, there's a very special potato dish. Maybe not surprising from a German perspective, but also the danger is that you start playing with the prejudice that some people are eating the sauerkraut, for example. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little bit cautious with that, but I still think it's important to acknowledge the global diversity in food and acknowledging that on local level, if we have rice that Selassie just mentioned, the African rice, which is growing probably much better in the African context, why not promote the growing of African rice in Africa? And that's, I think, it's really taking up the local spirit and taking up the local food that is produced and also promoting the local diversity.
Yeah, but food, I mean, it's a connector. I mean, there are these, staple crops like rice and potatoes, and we see them in many different food cultures. And, everyone will make something slightly different out of it, but it's still a connector. Selassie, I have a question for you coming in. It's about the climate conference. I'm not sure if you're still connected to some of the activities, of course, of the United Nations, but everyone knows it's going on right now in Glasgow. What do you think that are the topics that the world leaders should talk about when it comes to food? I mean, what are the most prominent topics for you?
Well, I think the first is that food production is one of the main contributors to climate, the climate challenges. And if we're not having a conversation around that, we're missing out on a lot of stuff. So that's the first thing I would say. And I think, linked to what we were just talking about in terms of biodiversity, there needs to be a solid understanding of what grows where. My first degree was in geography. And so whenever I see things, I see the biomes and the climates in which we live in. And until we're able to respect that, we're not going to kind of get too far. So I would say that in my context, I started looking at what are the things that do well with less inputs, with less water, as we're looking at more erratic rainfall. And that's what I started putting on the plate. And that's what I'm trying to create delicious food around, so that people can get excited about those ingredients, because that's kind of the long game that we need to play. But I think food production, food waste, all of those are elements that are huge in terms of our full understanding of the impact of agriculture and food production in the climate agenda.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they are on the agenda. We have to see and wait what's come out of it. Stefan, I also have a question for you. You showed us some examples of socially just politics and food production, but do you have any examples about more the distribution of food that is fair? And you mentioned also the supply chain.
Yeah.
Are there any practical examples you can give?
I mentioned the community-supported agriculture as an example where people work together, but there are different ones. In Italy, for example, you have the GAS, the Gruppo Acquisito Solidale. It's a solidarity purchasing group, working in a similar way, that there are groups, communities of consumers working together for collaborating with farmers, not only necessarily on the local level, but also on a more distant level. And then in the end, working around the food chain, saying we buy directly from farmers the organic food in order to support the farmers, and by not including a long food chain, but rather going for a short food supply chain, it is much easier to trace where the food comes from, because I think that a lot of problems might also relate to trust in the food system. And the shorter the food chains are, the easier it is to connect farmers with consumers, and by that it's a way to guarantee that there's not a problematic relationship with the various middlemen that might be involved in it.
Yeah, so like cooperations, like new forms of cooperations.
And you see various community food initiatives that are really trying to make a difference. They are experimenting. And I think that's quite exciting to see that people really think, well, we can make a difference and really, try to also put it into practice. Yeah.
Another question that maybe relates to this, like, do you have any examples of large-scale trends that are also hopeful? This is maybe one. Also the community effort of creating small-scale food systems. But what are other trends that are hopeful for the future?
I mean, you could see that there's a trend towards more healthy food on a general level, that the people at the moment, seeing that we have been passing the corona pandemic, that health has become a new value, that people are rethinking, okay, is it the planetary health, is it the personal health, and interpreting these kind of health mechanisms also into the food that we are eating, starting to rethink what food is eating, and trying to live a healthy life. It is healthy for yourself, but also healthy for the planet.
Yeah. Is it Selassie, the corona pandemic, did it impact Ghana in a totally different way, I think? Or do you recognize any of the things that Stefan is mentioning?
No, absolutely. I would agree. I think for a lot of people, health came into the picture, but also in Ghana, we are very much a net importer of food. And I think it was a moment for people to start saying, hey, supplies are not coming in the way they were. What are we going to do? And where's our food coming from? So I noticed within Ghana, there was a lot more families that were doing gardens, that could do gardens in their backyards. And a lot of people started reaching out to local farmers and started asking more questions about where their food was coming from, started eating more local ingredients that they felt they had a better idea of where the food was coming from. So that was definitely a positive outcome of a difficult situation.
Yeah, I think it's similar also here in the Netherlands, that local food got lots of attention, and something that was so normal, I think, for everyone. The distribution and supply of food and the abundance also in supermarkets sort of got shaken up. That, hopefully it's a fruitful thing we can build upon. Stefan, a question for you. It's about, we talked about the school meals, but do you think also education for kids, is it needed to create more understanding of food and sort of a better better acceptance?
I think education is vital. However, I think one of these aspects that is taken less into consideration is the bodily dimension of education. Thinking of transmitting knowledge, this is very often the case, saying, yeah, but people need to know more about sustainable food. Yeah. I would rather go a step further and argue for tasting the sustainable food, having the bodily experiences once you had the food tasted. And I think that's also something that we could learn from Corona. Maybe I'm a little bit more pessimistic that there's not necessarily coming a change about, but people started experimenting, and that's something that is also vital for education. Not saying, okay, we learn about nutrients, we learn about carbohydrates, protein, and vitamins, but also learning to appreciate the food by preparing it, by eating it, by sharing the social situations in class, and that's a complete different cup of tea than just saying, okay, we have to educate young people. But the question is how you're doing it. And I think if you take the more practical side of it, which is very often, and that's maybe also a downside that we can see in the last couple of months, that for at least in some European countries, that a lot of restaurant workers have left the sector and they moved to other businesses because it's not attractive for various reasons. And that many restaurants shut down, reduce opening hours, and that people become less interested in working in food. But on the other hand, we can also see that there's another trend going the exact opposite direction, saying that people are more interested in the food. So there are things which are not coming really together. So it's very interesting to investigate and find out more about these societal developments and how food is seen and how food is produced and in the end also eaten.
Yeah. You are researching it, I hope.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. So we will hear about it in some months. But also like changing the way we create education. Hopefully there's also a role for the Flevo campus in this. I mean, they're not focused on primary education, but I'm triggered by what you're telling us about how you give food education, not as a sort of a theory, but something that that's accessible for everyone, because that's what I like about the topic of food. I mean, I can ask everyone, like, what is the favorite dish you had when you were a kid, or what were your parents, serving for dinner, and then everyone has their own stories and memories, and sort of to go from there, and not to bring it as a real, like, a theoretical and maybe too complex issue, but really touch the emotional side of it.
Yeah, but if you, for example, see one example is the food pyramid. You might know it, where you have different nutrients that you need to eat. It's very, very abstract, and it's not really. And as the topic of today is taste, it's not really tasting because there's not really. You cannot feel the food in there. But if you think, for example, of a plate as a representation of food, it shows in a much better way of the food that is eaten than having a rather abstract pyramid, right? And in that way, I think it's the practical side of food that needs to be considered, for example, in chefs or cooks or caterers that are preparing the food, but also in the household context, which is, I think, very negatively associated nowadays, that people are not having the time, finding excuses for not preparing the food. And of course, it's also promoted by food industry, saying that we have convenient food available for all, which is just easy. Open the microwave and ready is the food, right? But the question is preparing food also a joy? Is digging in the ground, in the garden, also bringing joy, as is the preparation of food? Having it as a social event in the evening together with friends or family preparing food. And I think that's more emphasizing the positive aspects and saying, oh, we have to cook tonight, but it's rather emphasizing that food has socially very important aspects to give.
Yeah. Selassie, maybe to round up, last question for you. Someone is really interested on how is the veggie eating in Ghana. Maybe we can conclude with that one. The trend of eating less meat, how is it in Ghana?
I would say that it is not great right now. Though I would say traditionally we do eat a lot of vegetables, and our traditional dishes are based on lentils, beans, and other types of nuts and seeds, for example. But the trend has been sort of, that aspirational middle class diet of being able to afford more animal protein. So that's kind of what the trend is actually looking like right now.
Yep.
There are some groups that are doing vegetarian and vegan. There's a couple of vegan restaurants that have opened up in Ghana. But I wouldn't say it's the norm, but it's starting to come into the context. And again, the trigger or the interest is based on human health. So the conversation is really about how am I going to become a healthier person through eating this food.
Yeah. Thank you so much, both. I mean, we can talk about this for much longer, but we're going to move to our next speakers. Selassie, thank you so much for joining us this morning from out Ghana. A lot of success with Midunu and all the work you are doing, and I hope we can stay in touch. Stefan, thank you so much, and hopefully we can come back to you after some months and see also what Corona has done to all our food and eating patterns. So stay in touch as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we move over to the last part of this program, and we go from the theory and the international perspective back to Flevoland, to Almere, to get a better understanding of what the Flevo campus is doing in their innovation and research projects. Some of the projects they are running are already mentioned by Lenno at the start of this program, and is called Supermarket of the Future, a project in close collaboration with entrepreneurs and farmers and chefs, and we want to know all about this. So we have two guests at our table. Welcome, Femke Mosch and Bilal Bouazza. Femke, you are a food innovation strategist, and Bilal, you have your own catering company in Lelystad, I understand. Thank you for being here, and we're gonna talk about the projects you are running for Flevo Campus. But first, Bilal, I heard you opened your restaurant or your catering company during the Corona pandemic. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
How are you doing? Tell us a bit about it, because that's a bold move.
Sorry?
It's a bold move.
Yeah. What can I say? The plan to start something for myself was already there in my head.
Yeah.
So the Corona and everything that has to do with it, sort of, made my decision to do it a lot faster.
Yeah.
Because obviously the work was changing, and the future was looking less bright.
Yeah.
But
didn't stop you for
no, because I think
plans.
in every business this is like a roller coaster. So you have good times, you have bad times. So I thought, why just don't get in at the bad times, and
can only be better afterwards.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
That's a good perspective. Tell me a bit about your catering company. It's called Laymous,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, Laymous. And so for me, my ultimate goal is a restaurant.
Yeah.
And so my idea was, I just came across this a garage, and that's where I built my kitchen. I thought maybe this is the best first move for me to
start with the catering.
Start with the catering, let people get to know me as a person and as a chef behind Laymous, because a lot of people didn't know that I was cooking.
Yeah.
And
it's you in the garage. You are making it. Yes.
Yeah.
And if we order your food, what is it that we can taste?
So mostly it depends on the setting. So I'm lately I cook a lot on locations. So that gives me more. It depends on the location, more or less. How you say it? Possibilities.
Yeah.
So for the takeaway, I just decided to make it simple but really tasteful.
Mm-hmm.
And
most important, tasteful.
Yeah, tasteful is very important. Taste is very important. When I grew up, my mother always asked me to change
to taste it
with her.
Give feedback.
Yeah, because we had a lot of people at our home back in the day. So when you give a plate and it is not good on flavor, then it's considered as an
Sort of insult, or yeah,
kind of.
Yeah.
So
So you were trained really well.
I hope.
We will hear more about that later. Femke, you are the project leader of the Supermarket of the Future. Sounds really futuristic, but tell us what it's all about, what you're aiming for with this project.
Yeah, the Supermarket of the Future, of course, we are aiming for a better, well, I don't know if it's going to be better, of course, but actually we're saying like it's of the future, but we do need to act now. We can't wait like until 2050, for example. So we're researching the value of the supermarkets, and now it's really a logistic value because everything's always there, and that's a good thing. Well, you can question that, but it's very unique that we have this situation. But it's not much about taste. For example, if you ask someone who's filling the shelves, what shall I make with this product, then he probably don't know the answer.
Not going to give you a recipe.
No. And also, the supermarket is also not very about the social part. What Stefan also taste is social. But a supermarket is actually really a logistic vehicle. And we have some social parts in the supermarket, like the coffee table and also the feedback board where you put your card,
your
like I'll sell a bike or whatever. I'm searching for someone like this. And we want to make it more, the supermarket also research if we can make the supermarket more social. And we do all kind of researches, but one research is that we're looking for a more bottom-up approach and to involve the consumer more in the development of the product. Yeah. And we are developing now 2 local products.
Yeah, because you're really focusing on more local products on the supermarket shelf.
Not only, it's a part of the Supermarket of Future is actually more than only local products. Yeah. But this is one of the researchers. I can't mention them all, so I will focus on the local products. Yes. And we want to have this more bottom-up approach, like Stefan also mentioned. And we developed the products, or Bilal did, but I helped, of course. And we asked the consumer first, like, what do you think of this taste? Is it something that fits in your diet? When would you eat it? In which context? So we made 2 products, like a kroephoek. It's a crispy cracker, and a spread made of local beans. And we asked them, okay, what do you think? What price would you buy for it? Does it make sense for you that it's local, yes or no? So a lot of people said yes, but then in the end we only know when people would really buy it and do the act of paying money.
It's different from answering a questionnaire.
But that's also really interesting. What makes the difference between a citizen saying I want to have more sustainable things and a consumer saying not acting
in
like
a supermarket, seeing the price label or
and what is then the what kind of values do they want to for example buy more local products, and is that something they want? So this is the consumer side. Then we have a big group, well, let's say, but it's quite big for this pilot, of 12 supermarkets, and some more are also on the way. So we hope to end up with 15, so we can have a bit of scale to sell these products, because we need a rotation, of course, so it needs to be also commercially very interesting. And then we also, of course, have the farmers, and you have to sketch the what's happening in Flevoland. We have a big province, and we have some cities, but a lot of agricultural land.
Yeah,
and
it's
a lot
famous for. I mean, the production of food. It's
we have so much food, and for your idea, we had there is a company producing the spread, and he told me that they were buying local potatoes, and that's 1.2 million kilograms per year. And then you think, wow, this is amazing. This is they are doing local stuff. That's great. But then if you actually, it's they only buy the potatoes from 1.5 farmer. So not even 2 farmers in the province of Flevoland. Yeah. So, and we have more than 2 farmers producing potatoes. Yes. So then is the question actually, where is local food about? And then I was very triggered by what Stefan said, because is it also not about education part, or is it more about the social part of local, or is it really about the product going to the next city? So this is actually, we are developing this product, and this is a way of researching. We're just doing it, and it's a method finding out where the barriers are, and then hopefully we can make the way free to get more local products on the shelves, or decide that it's maybe we need to have another approach to, for example, connect the farmers with the consumers via more restaurants in the hinterland, for example. Or
because it's really research by doing. I think that's also what the Flevo Campus is. Yeah. It's all about sort of setting up new research methods, using practical projects to to get an understanding of what should be researched, and to really get all the stakeholders involved. Yes. So that's a really interesting setup. And Bilal, so you got involved as a chef, and you developed the products. What were sort of the difficulties? Because it's a spread and a kroephoek. I never made kroephoek myself. I think that's really something a chef should do, or I don't think someone is making kroephoek in their own homes. It's quite a process, I think.
Well, maybe.
How did you go about with the development?
No, we were looking into what the farmers have in Flevoland. Yeah. So like what's available. So Femke has
potatoes, onions.
Exactly, and potato came to me very quick to my mind, because it's a well-known vegetable, and I already had this recipe of a kroephoek based on potato, and I said, well, we can make a kroephoek out of it. And Femke responded very good. She thought it was a very good idea. So from there on, we took it on and experiment with it. And so I decided to introduce more vegetables into the recipe. So I added onions, garlic, and carrots. And in the end, we have a recipe that's very full of flavor. But the challenge was, so if you want to make a kroephoek, so if you want, in general, want to make something crispy, your fundament, your base of this recipe is tapioca. Yeah. And so we don't produce that here. Yeah. So Femke gave me then the order to reduce that as much as possible.
How many rounds of product? The version? We don't have it here today, but how many times did you had to improve the recipe?
More than 10 times.
More than 10 times.
Yeah, because it's also I have a bigger kitchen than a house kitchen. Yes. But then again, it's still like a house kitchen. So I did everything just by hand. Yeah. It's not like how they do it in the factories. When you have all these kinds of machines, and you can make sure that the shapes are even, etc., etc.
Yeah, really handmade. Well, that's also a quality. Maybe people are interested in hand-baked.
Well, there were people during the researchers in the supermarkets who gave such replies as well. It tastes very. I said in English.
Sort of authentic.
Handmade.
So you made the 2 products, and then you took them, or your team took them to the supermarkets, to people.
To let them taste.
Yeah, to let them taste the products. What was sort of the feedback you got that was sort of most maybe interesting also for you in your research project?
People really liked it, more the kroephoek than the spread.
And the spread was made of?
Beans.
Beans, yeah.
Yeah, but these beans are very bitter, and this is also something very interesting because the farmers produce a lot of these kind of beans, but it's very industrial. It's actually for the industry.
Yeah.
And then that's actually it's a bit of a crazy system in this, but we try to make something delicious with the beans, but then also taste is the question was, what is more important? Is it that it's 100% local or that it's tasty?
Yeah.
And if you want people...
I know your answer.
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, we sort of agreed on...
What in your opinion?
A taste. Otherwise, people would not buy it again.
Yeah.
And that's also people are sometimes very romantic about more local food, but then still, if it's not tasty, people will buy it once because it's very very good then that it's local. But you want people to buy more often than once, so you need a tasty product. So then we decided, okay. If is 100% local ingredients, we are aiming for 80% with 20% not local ingredients, and so the veldspread is also made with a little bit of tahini because it's way more tasty
sesame,
with the sesame paste. Yeah. So these were all kind of questions popping up while researching, of course, and it's very interesting also to involve the consumer more, but they are not really used to be more a part of the process.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, also very interesting. If you talk about more social supermarket, what is the role of a consumer, and is a consumer interested to play a bigger role or not? So.
Yeah. And do they know what they want? Or, I mean, you just go to the supermarket and then there's this, abundance of, different choices and you just,
I think the people should be aware of the impact, the consumers, they should be aware of the impact they have on the supermarkets.
Yeah,
I
that
think
they can influence actually.
Way more than.
Yeah.
Because the consumers are very demanding, that's how the supermarkets are operating as an answer to that. So, for instance, yes, if you say, do you want something that's more local or biological, and obviously they will say, yes, I want it. But if you give them like two gems, one is brown and then one is has a nice color, they will choose for the one that has a nice color, and not the one that's maybe a little bit more brown.
Yeah.
But that's the one that is 9 of 10 times the one that is better for you. So that's a perspective that the consumers also has to be aware of as. Because that's why, you have a lot of small supermarkets who try to get in the game and try to be more local, etc., but they cannot compete with the bigger ones.
No, and we were also talking about an inclusive food system. I think maybe many people are really not that interested in food or don't have the time to think about it. Or how do you make a project like this inclusive and hear different stories and different perspectives?
Yeah, we want, of course, to first an affordable price, but then we need scale, so we need more supermarkets. And we were 4 days in a supermarket to ask the people what do you think, what prices?
For the tastings.
Is it, for the tastings, but also to get a short conversation, of course, about Flevo Campus, but also about the products, about their perception of food and local food and what's triggering them and what's not, what is not very important for them. So, for example, we also had a question: is important is local food important for you? And then 25% said no. Well, that's also a good answer, because if we're aiming for more local food and people are not interested, then or do we need then to take some action to explain why local food could be more interesting? So every step we take, we have more like questions and more research of ways to things to research. But in the end, I think this is a really nice method to just do it and then find out where are the barriers, and then we are on our way, but we are not there yet.
Yeah. So what are your next steps? So you made the products, you did the tastings at the supermarkets. You have quite some supermarkets involved. I mean, 12. It's I think a nice number for a city like this. What's going to be your next step?
We are now talking to the factories. They have to make they have to make the products in their factory, and that is different from the kitchen of Bilal, because the dough you are making the kroephoek of, it needs to be more not so fluid, so
thicker substance,
thicker dough. So this is really another challenge to develop the product in a more factory context.
Yeah.
And if they are we find the perfect recipe for in the factory, then we need to find out, okay, what are the prices of all the ingredients. Of course, we need to make the packaging and all these things, and hopefully on the Floriade we will sell it.
Present it. Because that was my question. What is sort of the end? You know, what's the end game?
For us as Flevo Campus is not very. We are not the owner of this local product line, but we use this as a method, and it would be really great if we finalize and everything is on the shelves. But we see this as a research method. Although we want to have an owner of the product, of course.
So if anyone is watching and is thinking, okay, I'm interested in maybe participating, a food producer or someone with a lot of knowledge about food production, they can contact the Flevo Campus. So next year on the Floriade,
we will
hopefully
eat
we can, we all eat kroephoek and all the hopefully international visitors. Bilal, so you will, it's nice that it's going from your kitchen to the factory. I think it's also a good thing for you. How do you stay involved in the project? Will you be involved in the recipe making, or was this your part on just, giving it the first hand?
So I'm kind of involved with mostly all of the aspects in this project. So whenever and wherever I can help, Femke contacts me, and for instance, for now she's looking for the cost price, and then and she asked me, can you fix up you make sure that the recipe is good, is finalized, etc., etc., and then she researches the price, and then she gives me feedback. It costs, for instance, it's too expensive. Then we can look. We have like like a meeting. Okay, let's cut off this, let's cut off that, and then.
So you will stay on board.
Yes,
that's really nice. Good luck with your catering company, and for everyone who's in the neighborhood and lives in Lelystad or surroundings, go to Laymous and order your great tasty food at Bilal. Femke, good luck also with the research project, and really curious what comes out of it.
Me too.
And I will keep an eye on the Floriade next year, and hopefully we all see you there. So thank you so much for being here today. And this is also the end of the program of this Flevo Campus Dialogues. I want to thank you as our guests. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for participating. If you are interested in any of the projects that Flevo Campus is running, the supermarket of the future, or the plans that are coming at the Floriade next year, stay in touch, visit their website, or subscribe to their newsletter. And then, if you're still craving for more input, more information, we have 3 really nice deep dive sessions this afternoon lined up for you. After lunch, 1:30, they will start, and you can log in through the platform you're already on right now. And it's themed session, Vegan Revolution. We will talk with different taste makers about the role of taste in developing vegan products. We have the workshop Inclusive Marketing, which is fully booked already. So hopefully you subscribed for that, and otherwise you have to pick another session. It's with Chef Taha Riani. And the last session, it's about Arabic flavors in the Dutch supermarkets with Nadia Siriwali. And you can still join that session. So hopefully you enjoyed this program. Stay in touch with the Flevo campus. Hopefully see you next year, or otherwise this afternoon at the deep dive sessions. Have a really nice day. Thank you.